like a mineral. You'd think it was a sparkling water almost, and
Yeah.
it's an alcoholic beverage. And they've been very, very popular in the US. And so they're starting to come over here now. Whether they kind of break through or whether they remain a kind of niche product is we'll
Right.
see.
And what percentage are they?
They're kind of like 5-6%.
Really?
What I'm
Really?
aware. I've never tasted one, to be honest, so I'm not sure if they're good. But some people have said they
Yeah.
quite like them.
Yeah, it's a bit like these fruit ciders, isn't it? They're
Yes,
they're
yeah.
very popular. So yeah.
What's the strongest beer you've produced, and is a collaboration I think you did?
It was, yeah. The strongest one we've done was you did one with Colonel. We've done a couple of times called Victorian Mild,
That's
which is a kind of traditional mild, but it's a really lovely beer.
That's what Pete Boogie brought up, yeah. And I remember you remember seeing that come out. Colonel's a good brewery as well, as you know. So yeah, you get some more of them going. That'd be great.
So was that mild a higher percentage? Did you say?
Yeah, the Victorian milds were a bit stronger, so 6%.
Oh,
so
wow.
usually,
Okay.
if you think of mild, it's a much lower ABV.
Yeah,
A Victorian mild, so it was stronger, and it was kind of a bit similar in nature to our porter in a way, but it was got all those kind of dark malty flavors, not very hoppy, but it had really nice kind of malt flavors to it. So it was really lovely, particularly in kind of the autumn and the winter. A nice beer to sit by the fire and sip slowly.
Yeah, no, certainly. So, Steve, did you have any questions? Anything you wanted to bring up?
Not particularly.
No, that's all right. Should we just have another beer then?
What's next on the agenda? We're going to have the solar next, aren't we?
Yeah. So.
And this one is my personal favourite. This is my absolute go-to. Absolutely love it.
So, I mean, Andy, I was being a bit facetious. Obviously, I did have a few. Yeah. I did have a few questions. So whilst we're all...
well, I have to take your first answer.
Okay. Well, I'm happy just to shut up and drink up. I'm happy to go with that. But, like Andy, so Andy Moffat, Andy. So, like, you know, before you actually got Redemption going, you started off as a home brewer, if I'm right. And obviously you moved into brewing. So what made you decide that you could turn this into a business and that you could expand it and make it into something profitable?
To be honest, I initially wasn't 100% sure. We were, kind of going from the home brewing to, and I was a very average home brewer. There's some really great home brewers out there, but I wasn't one of them. I was a very average home brewer. But I kind of felt that there was an opportunity, and I was getting kind of fed up in my old job, and things were changing there. And I thought, it'd be nice to start my own business. And so I thought, well, at that point in time, there weren't many breweries in London at all. There was some bigger breweries like Fuller's in the meantime, but there hadn't been this kind of growth in the smaller microbreweries in London that we had seen in other parts of the country. If you went up to the northwest or down to Cornwall or the
Bristol.
Bristol, yeah, there were lots of smaller breweries who were doing some really great beers. But for whatever reason, this hadn't happened in London, partly due, I think, to the tide market and the cost of premises and lack of premises. So I thought, well, maybe we can do this. So I did a course at Brew Lab, which was in Sunderland, which is a kind of a part of Sunderland University where they do brewing courses and stuff. And I thought, well, yeah, kind of quite enjoyed that. It was from a kind of commercial brewing perspective, and did quite a bit of research. And then I thought, well, actually, I think we could try and give this a go. So we went and got some old equipment. I mean, some of this equipment had been 20 years old, and we managed to kind of somehow put it together. Got an industrialist unit, and that was us. And and the other thing is, quite often when people thought of brewing, they thought of, it was in the countryside or by the seaside or whatever. And I loved the idea of it being in quite an urban area in London. And that was the thing, because Tottenham was quite a different place back then as well. When we first started, we didn't sell any beer in Tottenham because there were no good pubs serving the kind of beer that we brewed at that point in Tottenham. So there we were making this beer, but we didn't sell any in Tottenham. And now you look, nowadays, so many pubs in Tottenham that buy beer from us. And it just shows how things have changed considerably in that fairly short period of time. Our estate as well, our industrial estate, was half empty when we went into it 10 years ago. And now, of course, it's absolutely full.
So what was the driver for actually sort of setting up in Tottenham itself? And as you say, you didn't have a market there. You had to, your pubs that were selling, like, would sell your beers were elsewhere. So whereabouts did you have to, put your beer out to?
So it was out to places like East London, where there were kind of pubs in there, north, in places like the Wenlock Arms, down just off City Road, for example, places in the West End, and the city. But there were far fewer pubs who were, again, even within London. And the pub landscape has changed considerably during that time as well. So we had to just kind of look for, and what we found is people were approaching us because it was quite rare to have a new brewery. So a lot of what you'd call tickers pubs in London, who people would go to try a new beer and tick it off their list, and there are a number of pubs like that in London that were quite well recognized. And so we were in pubs like that, the Harp as well in Charing Cross, which many of you may know, a great pub, and they were quite an early supporter as well. So it was, Tottenham was great because we were looking for a place that had a good industrial space, good kind of communications, good connections, and Tottenham was actually a really, really good place. And I joked, there was someone came and did an interview with us kind of early on, and this when we were the only brewery in Tottenham, and they said, well, why Tottenham? This kind of none of the pubs are there. Other breweries had been opening in places like Hackney and Bermondsey at this stage. And I said, well, there's so many great things about Tottenham that, if you come back in a few years' time, you might find that there'll be a Tottenham beer mile. There'll be that many breweries coming to Tottenham. And of course, nowadays, there's loads of breweries in Tottenham. So it just shows how things can change in a short period of time.
Yeah.
So Andy, Andy, just while we're on the solar at the moment, how did the solar come about? And I mean, I've obviously said before that this is my absolute go-to when I go to Redemption. I'm predominantly a lager drinker, but the solar it's just, I love it. How did it come about? And
it was a beer that we were missing really in our range. It was kind of a more kind of modern style, because it's not very clear either. And it's a kind of that hoppy American session style beer, similar to the likes of a neck oil, those styles of beer, which have become incredibly popular in recent years, particularly with that younger demographic as well. So that was a beer that really we kind of knew we had to make at some point. We didn't used to do any keg, until 2 or 3 years ago. So traditionally we're always a cask focused brewery. And this was the first product we had that was just dedicated to keg. So it was an ideal product for us to bring out. And we're really pleased with it. I think we've kind of continued to improve it over the years. And now we're really, really, really happy with it.
So is it shorter brewing process with the keg? You miss a stage, didn't you? With the
a bit longer stage.
Oh, a bit longer. Okay.
Well, because we force carbonate it. So whereas with the cask product, it's a secondary fermentation in the cask. With solar, it's carbonated. So it's a slightly different brewing process. We try and take as much of the yeast out of the solar as possible. Whereas with the other beers, we need to leave a little bit of yeast in there for the secondary fermentation in the cask. So,
I see. So you just have a single fermentation with solar, do you?
Just a single fermentation with solar, exactly,
right.
Andy.
Okay, yeah. Okay, that's quite interesting. So you were saying there, Andy, about solar being on the same kind of genre of beer as like neck oil, and of course in the stadium, Beavertown is in the stadium with neck oil. Is that something that you're going to try and do and get your beers into the stadium?
We would have loved to. We were in before, so a number of years ago, they had Hopsburn bottles but just in the executive boxes. And one day they did put the cask on some of the concourses, because they got a team in from the catering team came from Brighton, and Brighton always had a great range of beers. They had some Harveys in, Star in, and they would sometimes try and get some of the opposing team's beers from their town in if they So this catering team came in and they were really keen to work with us, and great. So we were really happy about it. But when the Hopster went in to the concourse, Carlsberg had the contract for the stadium at that point, and they weren't very happy about it, because for them, as far as they were concerned, they paid for the rights to the stadium, and they only wanted their beers. They only put in 10 casks around some of the concourses, so you'd only be talking about 700 pints potentially. But they said no, we're not going to allow that to happen again. And then obviously the new stadium came along, and they were looking to partner with the brewery to build the brewery, to take on the brewery that Spurs were building in the stadium and build a bar. And really, there was no way we could do that. We don't have the resources to do that. And Beavertown were quite well placed, and
they're owned by Heineken, I think, aren't they? So
they've got Heineken have a stake in them. I think they still. I think they have I don't know how big the stake is, but it's a reasonably large stake.
So they could always scale up if they needed to. A lot easier. So
it'd be great to be back in at some point. If they had us in some capacity, that would be great, in the future.
Well, I think they should. I mean, they're always supporting the local community, and I think they should be supporting local businesses. So maybe there should be a bit of a fan intervention here, and try and get the club to actually take a bit more notice, and get people like yourself and Aura in there, and all the local breweries that are in the area. Yeah, definitely.
I think the other local one is 1 Mile End.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
which is
they're in our old brewery, unit number 2. So when we moved out of there, we kind of gave them a heads up that they might want to move in there. So we've always known those guys quite well. And
they moved from Whitechapel, from the White Hart.
That's right. Yep, below the road, brewing below the road.
That's right. Yeah. There you go. So with White Hart to Tottenham.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. So, Steve, I think you had another question, didn't you?
I did actually. I started to say it and realised I was on mute, but I'll carry on. So I've unmuted myself now. So, and it was like amongst us, we were aware. I mean, this was your 10-year anniversary this year, I think. And what plans did you have to celebrate the 10 years? And like how obviously, because COVID obviously decided to jump in the way and disrupt your plans. And so what are you planning to do? Like how are you adapting to those plans in terms of how you're going to celebrate when we can?
So we were going to have the kind of the 10-year party, which has obviously been put on hold just now. And then we were doing this 10 years, 10 beers for 10 years as well. We're going to do 10 different beers as well. So we kind of started early on, but then when lockdown came, that obviously put a hold on things. So I think we'll probably struggle to get to 10 this year now. So we might try and just push everything a little bit forward into next year, when it'll be much easier to do everything and for people to be able to access it and to be able to enjoy stuff. But we'll definitely still celebrate it next year. But at the moment, it looks like it's going to be kind of tricky to do too much for the rest of this year.
So when you're actually able to let people back in the brewery, when is the...
Technically now, we could open the tap room now. But for us, it's always been about the Spurs fans. So we've only ever opened when Spurs are at home, and there's a special atmosphere there, I think. And if we're in an industrial estate, which is a little bit out the way, and we've never really had a lot of non-Spurs fans coming up to the brewery. Again, because it's a bit out the way, it'd be a bit different if we're down next to Beavertown at Tottenham Hill. So so for us, we've only ever opened on Spurs games, and